Hello and welcome back to Broll Redux. This is David Square. How's it going, David?
Hey, good morning, David. How are you? Nice to see you again.
I'm doing good, doing
You
good.
got your haircut? You got a haircut yet?
No, it's still
No,
it's still
still
back
back there.
there. It's still back there.
I got a haircut the other day, and I told my guy I want to comb it back, and he cut it in a way that I can only wear it like this. And I had this long piece. I can't see it on camera, but it's like I have to comb it this way. I can comb it the other way, but I'm kind of stuck and kind of annoyed. But I want to comb my hair once a day, and I don't want to mess with it. But it is what it is. I don't have a makeup artist following me around.
No, yeah. No,
I want
no
to comb it once.
hairstylist or anything like
Yeah, I
that
just want to be
on
done
set.
with it. Yeah, we had to buy a
Yeah,
back.
I need a haircut soon.
Yeah,
And it's too cold right now because we're close to Christmas time. So
maybe Santa Claus bring you a gift card to Cost Cutters. They changed the name of I think it was I forgot what the name of it was, but they now it's called Cost Cutters, and that's not a place to call it name a hair. It's not like going to buy a hamburger or grocery store. It's kind of weird, but $20 to get a haircut and be done with it,
hey, name of something is always important.
right?
And in this movie that we're talking about today, it went through a different variations of names and then finally
Right,
settled on something simple, something
right.
basic, something right to the point. Alien.
Alien, 1979. I see. We were talking at our pre-production meeting. You know, trying to think what we were doing. 1979. I think, a freshman in high school. Like, oh my goodness gracious! I don't remember seeing this
My
movie.
brother was born, I was not.
Yeah,
So
yeah, right. It's a long time ago. I'm looking at the pictures on Wikipedia of the actors, how they've changed.
oh yeah, I mean by the time I saw Tom Skeeter, and recognized who he was, I mean he was already gray hair,
Right,
gray
right.
mustache,
He's a great actor. He's a good actor.
looking really young in Alien
Right.
1979.
Yeah. It's a good movie. It
Oh,
just
it was a fantastic movie.
right.
Like I said, the
Everything.
first time I saw it, watching movies back then, I was younger. I saw it when I was younger, but we had, basic cable, channels like TNT,
Right.
TBS, TCM, even the local channels like CBS, ABC, they would edit the films for FCC standards.
Right.
So they
Right.
would, cut out the swearing, any sex scenes in there that would, cut those out. And they were at least rated PG-13-ish by
Right.
the time they reached the screen, and that's how I was able to be exposed to the films
Right.
like that. Which nowadays we don't get that. Everything's got go right to the streaming service, just slap an MA on there and then let
Deal
them
with it.
figure
Right.
it,
Yeah.
deal with it.
Let the parents. We
Yeah.
don't. We
stay
have
stay
a.
stay the FCC out of streaming. They can't say nothing about
Right.
it. It takes money. And, you have to pay an editor to
Oh
edit
yeah.
that stuff out, and yeah, it might not take that long to do it, but you're at least paying an editor a couple days work,
Right.
and at that time, we're not dealing with a digital medium like we are today.
Right.
So they're probably dealing with, hey, you got to like this almost VHS reel tape,
Right.
and you got to edit from that, or you got a film strip that they're running, and you got to literally take out frames from it.
You have to cut it like Rick Harrington. Remember that class we had at HCC where they teach you how to
Oh
cut
yeah,
film.
you don't paste or tape something properly, and you have to run it through a machine like 3 or 4 times. It's
Right.
going to get messed up, and then all
Right.
of a sudden you got to take out another frame. You got to take out
Right.
another frame. All of a sudden you're you're missing seconds out of that. So if that's messing things up, you got to take out even more. And this is how even older films prior to the 70s, could can be lost and have probably been lost to time because of how many times they have to be edited
Right.
and going through these machines. If that machine's not running perfectly, and even if it is, things are going to go wrong. Things are going to have to get trimmed. Who
Right.
knows who's trimming that? Do they keep those trimmings? Because if they kept the trimmings, someone can put it back together. But
Right.
most of the time, you trim something, it's like, nah, it's gone, right?
Right. What was his name in what's that movie? Fight Club. What's his name? Pitt's character.
Tyler Durgan,
Yeah, Tyler, you don't want
yeah,
Tyler Durden editing your film.
yeah, it's like, oh man, we took out a half a second somewhere. Let's put this frame from this porno in there.
That
You never
that's
know.
Oh, that's hey, we need to talk about that. That's a great movie.
Yeah,
Like,
I mean, that'll probably be maybe at the beginning of the year. Well, we'll talk about that one.
well, that's a
Fight
great movie.
Club.
Like
Well, today it's going to be Alien.
Alien, yeah, 1979.
Classic, classic. It was considered a flop, which most of these movies in the 70s and 80s are. We talked about Rocky in, a couple episodes ago, the last episode.
Right.
It's like, man, that was even considered almost a flop on the box office side, right? Because of whatever standards or whatever calculations Hollywood was doing, enough isn't enough.
Right.
It's never enough money for them. The budget was 8.4 million. I'm
Okay.
sure they went over budget, a little bit, because it showed that there was a lot of money on that screen.
Right.
But it made about 110 million dollars at the box office.
On the first run, is
Yeah,
it
on
on
the first run. I mean, that's nine, what, 900% profit?
right?
Yeah, that's that's a success,
Right.
but to them it's like, yeah, it didn't make as much money as Star Wars. That's what they were looking for. First Star Wars was already out. They were waiting for the next Star Wars to come out for their big payday. We're talking about 21st century Fox or whatever, 20th
Right.
century 20th century Fox.
20th century. Yeah.
you know uh but it didn't do as good as Star Wars. Well, one reason why it didn't do as good is because it was rated R.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah. Different. A whole different genre of movie. Yeah. Science fiction, but a whole different audience.
yeah.
Yeah. It wasn't very kid friendly. You
I
know.
mean, if you were going to market a film and you have a budget, let's say 10 million, and nowadays that's like no budget film. But,
Right.
back then, if you had $10 million and there was, okay, the script looks like it's going to be hard R, are you going to market that film as that? Or are you going to fight for changes? So like, hey, let's get this to PG-13. Because if it's PG-13, that's a teen market. Teens can just come by without parents and just get in this film and spend
Right.
their money.
Right.
So
You know.
would you do that, or would you go to like, hey, I'm going to take the script. It's like, we got to take this out, cut this, cut.
Yeah. And I think. I mean, and this is probably going to come with age, because as we know in scriptwriting, if it doesn't propel the story forward, do we really need these items, the swear word or the gratuitous you know topless shot of women, stuff like that, titillating stuff. If it doesn't move the story forward, I say get rid of it. But that's me speaking as a dad and as 60 years old. You kind of think about things differently. Uh, but you have the screenwriter that they're adamant that this has to be in there, but they're not the one paying the bills. Um, and it's got to come down that most screenwriters are paid and they move on. Um, so I say if it doesn't move the story forward, let's remove it and get more bang for our buck. Yeah.
So who would you rather listen to? The script writer or the director? Because both of them are going to have their own opinions on what needs to be in there, what doesn't need to be in there, and even on this film, there was clashes between O'Brien, and the art department, and Ridley Scott.
Right. Well, as a quasi executive producer, you have to say who's paying the bills. That's who you have to listen to, and it's a money making operation. So am I going to be able to make my money? Am I going to have constraints on X, Y, and Z because of this? It's not going to be as successful. The art department is it's instrumental in it because it's the aesthetics of the film. So that has to be, thought about more than language or gratuitous nudity.
Well, we talk about gratuitous nudity. This kind of had a problem because if you know anything about the person that designed the aliens and designed, like, the aesthetic,
Right,
Geiger, you know, he was very sexualized in his designs.
right, 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 right,
Things kind of looked like, female body parts,
right, right, right.
and other things.
Yeah, I think those things.
They fought for this. Ridley Scott and other people fought for it, but they did change some things so they look less that.
Right,
At what point do you say where's the compromise? Where it's like, okay, the aesthetic needs to be an aesthetic. If that guy's in charge of that, how far are you willing to fight someone on that before it's like, hey, something's going to happen. If they lost this Daniel Geiger, I think it's Daniel Geiger. If they lost him, they had to replace him. How different would it look?
Right. And is it going to make money or not? I mean, the ultimate thing is they're responsible for the shareholders, and these people are paid players, they're the other, you want to value their opinion and their ideas, but when it comes down to it, am I going to make money at this movie? And that's the bottom line for these studios. They have to make money. They're beholden to the shareholders. If this uh, prop master wants to go make his own movie, then go. But this is my money you're spending. You're a paid player. I value your opinion, but it's not going to work. So and we've had you and I want to do something, and then you say, well, it doesn't work, but why? But then you explain it to me why we can't do it and how it doesn't make sense. It says, okay, then it doesn't make sense. Those are the kind of, but it's different on these, multi-million-dollar films. But I say, as a business, it's a business. Filmmaking is a business. They're not making art films to go show to their kids. They want to make money, so it has to be that. I won't say a hard and fast line, but I'll listen to your argument. If you convince me, we'll do it. If not, we're going my way. Because I'm the one signing the check at the end of the day.
And your producers and everyone else, and the producers and everyone above them, they're the ones that haven't really got paid yet.
Right.
Like I said, they're the ones that are investors. They paid in.
Right.
Someone like the art director who's HR Geiger, he's already been paid.
Right.
Ridley Scott, he's already been paid. The
Right.
director's already been paid. So those producers are the ones, and investors are the ones that have the biggest risk, is because, well, they haven't got paid yet. So
Right.
this
And they
film
have to
has
be
to be
sure that,
successful.
right. It's not going to be banned in the theaters. It's going to be seen by the masses, so to speak, not a small specific set of society. So there's always, I'm sure, the back and forth of. But
Well, there's
ultimately, at the
definitely
end of the
back
day,
and forth.
who's
You know,
signing the
uh,
check?
they said that there was times where Ridley Scott had 9 producers on set, hanging over his shoulder.
Right. Well, then
And
that would probably make you crazy. Uh, and having the screenwriter on set. I mean, again, whatever's in the contract. Normally, a little bit I know. Okay, I'm going to buy your script. Here's $100,000. Go away unless I hire you for rewrites and stuff. You know, but I like the
which we
story.
talked about how on Rocky, how useful that is because of all
Right,
the scenes that had to be rewritten because of
right, right,
constraints.
right.
Right?
Well, those are probably because of the constraints of the budget. They had to make these changes. I can't have a car scene when he's walking down the street bouncing the ball. I want to have a car or a police.
Or extras.
It doesn't work, right? So we have to cut these things. Go bare bones. But I think artists are very passionate about their projects, and it's hard to convince them that it just won't work because of the budget. It's a budget constraint, and they have to understand. I think they need to realize that because people need to make their money back, so they make that next movie.
Well, Ridley Scott was probably a great director for this film and to handle that, because I'm sure these 9 producers were just egging him, like, come on, the good old, hey, it's time to
Right? Yeah, we
move
had the
on,
picture.
right off
Yeah,
set.
yeah,
You've given me that sign before, but
right,
he's someone that's like, hey, if I don't have that shot right now, it's like there's no
right,
point in moving on.
right,
If we don't get this shot is important. He had a vision. Ridley Scott was a self-made man, at the time. He prided himself on that,
right,
so he took that into his filmmaking, and you got what you got. It had to be a very difficult shoot. Everything, they built the sets basically, the entire floors of, the Nostromo were built on a stage each. So there
right.
was like 3 film stages that had basically the different,
Different, yeah, set
floors of
pieces.
the
Right.
ship. You
I didn't
know,
realize it was shot in England. It was shot in England. I didn't realize
yeah.
that.
Well, I mean, he's from there. A lot of things are at that time. And shooting in England, what probably worked out better for him, for Ridley
Right,
Scott, because he shot 80% of the film handheld. He put that camera on his shoulder with the shoulder rig and did it
Right.
himself. And do it in the States, which he tried to do for Blade Runner. You can't do that because
Right.
of
The
the
union.
unions and stuff like that. That union
Right.
restrictions where it's like, hey, only a camera person can touch a camera.
Yeah. Just don't get me started on unions. Ugh,
Oh,
not
they
alienates
got
my.
their own rules. They fight sometimes, but yeah, for independent filmmakers and for low budget filmmakers,
You're
once you
done
start
well.
bringing the unions in, they have restrictions. They got certain pay cost. There's that
Everybody wants to
famous
pay.
what
Right.
what James Cameron, and his AD over there in England were butting heads all the time because they were taking like tea breaks all the time. It's like, hey, I don't have time for this tea break. We just need to move on. But it's like,
Right.
hey,
Right.
that's union regulations.
Yeah.
We get these breaks. All
Yeah. I'm
right.
not a big fan.
So, no, in space, no one can hear you scream, is the tagline.
But you hear the engine noise and the sound. That's kind of weird. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
that always peeved me. It's like, hey, if I was a sound editor on a space show, and I've seen this happen like this before, where they actually do it right. When you're inside the ship, you can hear the noise.
right.
If you're outside in space, you shouldn't really hear the noise, but it depends on, there, be scientific, something has to burn,
Right.
right? We used to burn oxygen rich liquid.
Right.
And well, you're spitting out oxygen in that vacuum for a little bit. So there
Right.
is some oxygen in there, molecules that sound could travel for. But as farther you go, the least sound are. So if you're really close to the engine, I could say, yeah, maybe you hear that engine, but everywhere else should be silent,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's just something that, I guess it's to help people realize, what's going on, but you should be able to hear what's going on.
Right. 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 Yeah. I guess to make people not because it's so weird not to hear any noise, but you don't. I mean, I've never been to space, but it's probably pretty quiet, and just maybe just hear the oxygen, to hear them breathing inside their helmet and stuff. That was something that would, you'd hear in your own head. But yeah, it's kind of weird. Yeah. Our
Yeah, I mean,
interpretation.
things would travel through a vacuum, because it's space. It's just empty space, So these oxygen particles will move, and eventually will dissipate over time. But like you said, if you're wearing a helmet and you're outside, you have oxygen inside. You can hear yourself breathing.
Right, right, right,
So if those oxygen particles are coming your way, you might be able to pick out sound. Like I said, never
right,
been in space, don't know. But that always peeved me off, and in these old films, from the restrictions, the good old projector, when you
right,
see like the interior of the ship from the exterior,
right,
it just looked bad back then.
right, right, right,
Star Wars, they did it right.
right,
ILM must have did something, knew some kind of magic, because
right,
when they showed a little bit of that, it looked great.
right,
In Alien, it did not. It just looked like they had like a, a projection screen. Let's get the camera on it. Let's take a picture
right.
or film
Yeah,
that, and we'll throw it in there. And nowadays, it looks a lot better nowadays. Let's put it that
right.
way.
One thing I had to laugh about was when they're deploying to the planet and they're pushing out from the other. I'm thinking about Galaxy Quest scraping along the side. So I just started laughing. But it's all this. It's always the same thing over. No matter what movie you watch, there's these same scenes over and over and over again. Just throwing different characters and different. It just kind of when you start watching these movies and analyzing, it's the same thing. You just put a new cast of characters in there and a new what do they call it, red herring, something to go after.
Well, that was a famous line from, I think it was like Kubrick, and Spielberg have said it. It's like, well, if you're not stealing from the best, then you're doing
Right,
something wrong,
right, right,
right? And there will never be a story that's probably has never been told before. Every
right.
story has been told, every emotional journey has been told before, but
Somewhere
like you
else,
said, the
right?
circumstances and things have can change. But
Right.
everything else, it's already been done.
Right.
All
I
right, let's
read a
take a
good,
little break
yeah,
and we can
take a
come
break.
back and we can go a little bit deeper into the film.
Okay, my friend.
All right, we are back and we're talking about the famous quote of steal, if you're not stealing from the great, then you're not doing things right, and
Right,
this is no different. O'Brien or O'Bannon, the writer of this film, there was several movies, four of them, the Forbidden Planet, Planet of the Vampires, The Thing from Another World, and The Terror from
right,
Beyond Space. All of it has aspects that were basically
right,
in this film. Space truckers
right,
getting a distress signal, them going down the planet, finding a large alien, finding something an alien that's there, take it back, and they start getting terrorized by them. I mean,
right, right.
it
Same thing.
you
Yeah.
got to, those beats are there. There one of them is like, man, it's close. The first 15 minutes of this film is like almost right in this movie, right up to the
Right,
chest bursting. The reveal of the alien is
right,
completely different. And then afterwards, it's almost different. It turns
right,
into almost a horror film, horror
right,
survival film.
right,
After
right,
that chest bursting scene, it starts very, science fiction, turns into a horror. And I think that's
right,
what kind
right.
of separated it.
I was going to say, talking about, I read a good book. It's called Steal Like an Artist. Real quick read. Eric turned me on to it. Really good book about, getting your inspiration from something else. And that's what it is. You have to look at something and, say, what can I do different about this and change it? And, uh, yeah, it's a really good book. Steal Like an Artist. It was a quick read.
Yeah, I
For,
mean, like I said, you got to. Like I said, it's like every story has been told. Every emotional journey has been told. There are no new emotions. Every
right, right,
emotions that we know about today are emotions that have been known for since we've known about emotions.
right, right, right,
And we just have to manipulate that. And how do we manipulate emotions? Well, we find out how to manipulate emotions because of how someone already done it.
right,
Right?
right,
Well, that we've seen that, and that affected me this way. And so if I do that, it's going to affect someone else that way, possible,
right,
right?
right, right. Yeah,
And if you don't do that, well, nowadays, I mean, we've been telling stories for millennium.
right, right. Writing on the
Especially the
cave.
written word has been going on
Right,
for millenniums now. So it's like if you can't find something that hasn't been told, I mean, it's almost possible, right? Like I said, there's
right,
been so many things written, so many stories been passed through and told and passed down. It's like there is nothing original.
right. Nothing's original. Yeah. What
So
about the special effect? What are we talking about? What are we talking about? Special effects?
I love practical effects. I,
Right,
I believe that these older films are superior nowadays because we rely too much on the CG. CGI, we're still years and years and years away to burst past that uncanny valley where things look real CGI.
mhm,
That's not saying that there isn't really good realistic CGI out there, but it's not going to be humans, right?
right,
We can do mega scans of plants and foliage and and lighting effects, and those can look really real, and you can get really close up to it, and you wouldn't be able to tell difference.
mhm,
But humans, we're looking at each other right now, even though it's through a camera, and a screen, we're looking at a human face.
right,
So if we're looking at this all the time, you can't function in society without just constantly looking at people's faces and different
right,
faces.
right,
And we've seen myriads of different forms of faces. And we
right,
recognize them in faces. When
right,
we
right, right,
see anything that looks off, it's like, nah, that's fake.
right.
Oh,
Yeah,
they must have had plastic surgery. That nose is fake.
right, 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 right. Your
It's just
brains are
something
very
that's in our mind that we train so much, on unknowingly. We don't do it consciously. It just happens because
it
we
just happens, right?
every moment of the day.
Right,
And
yeah.
this, what we talked about, Alien Romulus, the new alien out there, they have Ian Holmes, who passed away years ago in that film as the Ash character, and they had to CGI him completely. And You
It's
know,
bad.
it's bad. It's bad.
Right.
The mouth moves differently. When we talk, our face and various
Right.
everywhere on our
Right.
face,
Just
it does
right.
micro, movements, and that you just cannot nail that with CGI right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Computing power is way off, and it just. I mean, I understand why they do it, but it's the politics of it. That's a scary part. There's people's images being replicated without their permission. That was one of the big reasons for the strike. Is their
well,
likeness?
I'm sure Ian Holmes, estate, got paid for the image
Right. Right.
license. I didn't hear anything about them having trouble getting there. Um, but at some point, we got to take those restrictions. If the CGI is not going to be able to look perfect, in that movie, they had his face like well lit up. It's like, why? Roll with the imperfections. We talked about in the Rocky how they rolled with those
Right.
imperfections. If you know that CGI is bad, hide it.
Right.
Put them in half shadows, put them in darkness, and where it's like, man, it's like you see them in the shadows, but maybe that's what it's too dark to see those micro
Right.
movements
Right.
in your
Yeah.
face, and
Yeah.
then you wouldn't been able to tell. People would probably be saying, oh man, how they do that, how they get him there and look that good. Well, that's because you're not plowing
See.
a 1,000-watt light right on the CGI's face, and you see every pore on there. It's like, man,
Right.
don't do that, hide it. And
Yeah.
when I grew up, we didn't have HD, right? We had these, we didn't have huge TVs either. I
Right.
watched things on a small little, 12, 13-inch square box that had an antenna, so you had
Right.
static, you had extra grain and stuff. It's like, man, they were almost blessed back then because the output media hid their imperfections as well.
Right. Right. Yeah. That's funny.
But let's get back to the original Alien because they had problems too. Ridley Scott didn't. I mean, the whole point is this to be an alien. To be
Right.
alien, it couldn't be human-like. So he wanted to do everything he could to make this non-human. And if you look at like the drawings and everything like that, this alien had a human skull.
Hmm.
And his head was supposed to be clear and filled with maggots and stuff. And it's like, well, it still had that human form on there. It's like we don't want that, so it's what it changed. Turned it into black, because I think they were running out of stuff too. So it's like latex black, hide that, that was the blessing. It's like, man, you made him look less human, not showing them from the front, full framed, long shot on them, so you don't see the legs and the arm and the structures and the ribs all at once. Make them look as alien as possible. They showed them in various angles, various snippets, just hid those imperfections and hid
Right.
those human attributes so they don't show up on screen because
Yeah.
it was a human. It was a tall male. I believe he was from Nigeria or Lagos,
Lagos.
somewhere, and yeah, I mean, he's in a suit.
Right.
It's going to have human features if you got someone that's a human inside a
Right.
suit.
Right. You have human movements and everything. Yeah. Yeah. To keep the suspension of disbelief, you have to not show as much. Yeah. Like I
And
said,
then you got to credit, H.R. Geiger, for his design of it, the way it looked and the way they hit it, on Henry Dean Stanton's character, when he died, right before he died, there was something above his head hanging. It was literally the whole alien basically in fetal position, just hanging
right.
down there. And
Right.
it's like, if you didn't know what the alien looked like, which before this movie, no one did,
Hmm.
then you wouldn't have been able to tell. Right? It's like you didn't know what that was. It just looked like part of the ship because there was a lot of
Right.
these organic, you
Right.
know, piping looking, ridges and stuff like that. It's like he blended right in with everything else.
Hmm.
Yeah, and the way that they just hid it in the background and it blended in with the various parts of the ship, even at the end, where he's in like the Scorny Weaver, at the console. at the thing. It's like, yeah, he was just laying right there, right above the console. And it's like, if you didn't know, or if you weren't looking hard enough, one,
Hmm.
there's not a bright light, on
Right,
there. They're hiding it. They're doing a good job hiding it.
right.
But until, you see the actual movement, then it starts popping out. And it's
Yeah.
like, but when Henry Dean Stanton, right before he died, it's like, man, I didn't know this at the time, but when I was rewatching, it's like, yeah, they show the almost the entire alien. He was bundled up in fetal position, just hanging on a
Hmm.
chain. It's like, man, yeah, that's clear as day to me now because I know what
Right.
it looks like.
I think
Back
one of
then,
the
it's like the first time there was no way. It's like, oh man,
right.
what is that? Some kind of industrial equipment. It's what you
Mhm.
assumed, right?
One thing I like about it and I don't like is the claustrophobic, the confined space of it all. And I think so you're kind of willing to accept things that you don't necessarily know what they are because it is such a closed space, and we've never been in a spaceship in space, so you kind of overlook these things are like they're right there in front of you. You don't see as much as I can't even watch a movie when they're going in a cave or something. I think, but the claustrophobic it heightened the the tension in the movie. The
Well,
claustrophobic.
the lighting helped. The decision to use basically all of like the practical lighting built into
Right.
like the set. Originally they were trying to do more like the TV style lighting that was rigged from the top. But, that means everything would have been blasted with light.
Hmm.
And it's like, well, then how would you be hiding, these
Right.
aliens and the
Right.
things on, the wall and how it blends in, unless you have that high contrast between the light and these little
Right.
fragments and the shadows and everywhere
I think
else.
it plays well as like as a character. Same thing with Jaws. You never see the shark, but you know it's there, and it's you never see it, but you're scared the hell out. It just adds that sense of
Oh,
dread to.
that tension building up. I mean, they did such a great job building that tension,
Right.
having that technology that's, the motion sensor, but it wasn't really a motion sensor. They gave it more scientific,
Right.
explanations. Oh, it like, grabs like the atmospheric pressure of the area,
That's
and
a
that's what it's
golly
doing,
good.
but
Made
all
up
you
terms.
all you know is like beep, 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 and a little dot. It's like, oh, it's getting closer to you. Building that tension, hearing that, that beep, 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 something that we've heard before, alarms beep, medical equipment, beep of, the
Right.
heartbeat, it's like if that beep, beep, beep gets faster, then we're thinking it's like, oh, like a heartbeat
Right.
faster,
Right.
right?
Yeah. Yeah,
So
all these
things that
little
we know,
nuances.
encompass it, using it to manipulate our emotions,
Right.
and that's what you got to do.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really good. I just like how young, I mean, again, go back to 1970 and how young the actors were. Looking at Sigourney Weaver and some of the Tom Skerritt, some of the how they've aged well, how old this movie
Yeah.
actually is.
Oh,
I didn't
John
know.
Hurt, John Hurt was even looking young, you know.
Right,
Tom Skeeter, he didn't want to do this movie. He didn't want nothing to do with sci-fi. They
right.
had to tell him, it's like, hey, it's going to be more of a thriller. He had to get the rewrite of the script.
Oh
That
yeah.
got it beefed up, and he waited for the budget, to be increased. And then after he read the rewrite of the script and the
Mhm.
budget being increased, he came back and said, yeah, I want to do it, but he wanted points on the back end. He's like, I'll
Yeah,
forego my big payment front. He's like, I don't
right.
want points on the back end because he at that point,
Had the vision. Yeah, he
yeah,
saw
he
vision.
knew it was going to be good.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think he had like 3%, 3% or something off of.
187 million. That's not too bad.
Yeah, I mean it's money. Plus, he was probably making in residuals, right? DVD sales, the
Right.
director's cut, releasing the director's cut to, theaters, all that's making money that goes to like these investors and people that have points on there. So yeah, when you see something that's going to be you believe in, jump on it. I
Yep.
mean that's how Robert Downey Jr. made a lot of money off of Iron Man.
Right.
Know?
Tom Hanks on Castaway. That's a smart way. Or Forrest Gump. They see something in it that hey, this is going to be. I'll forego my normal
And
my
if they
day.
forego that, that's more money for the budget to go somewhere else.
Right.
I mean,
Exactly.
the studio only offered them like 4.2 2 million to actually do it. While they were kind of like arguing, it's like how much money to actually, to make the film for, to produce it for, Ridley Scott was doing storyboards for the whole thing. And once that, he showed them the storyboards. Once they saw the storyboards, it's like they doubled the budget.
Mhm.
So what is your favorite part of this movie? What made it work for you, and what could have been done better?
Well, I mean, I'm going to say the same thing that probably a lot of people say is the reveal of the alien. I like it. The biggest reason is because the actor didn't know what the hell was going to happen, and you're actually seeing it scared the hell out of them, and that was true emotion, smart filmmaking, and yeah, that's probably my favorite. And as much as I don't like the the claustrophobic of it, the enclosed. I like it because it does work. It keeps you in that world, so to speak. And they're just like, what the hell do we do to get out of this? Yeah, that's mine. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. And you mentioned, not seeing like the alien form before. It's like they took so much care to not show the image of the alien before this movie came out.
right,
The poster was just the egg.
right. Yeah,
That
I remember
the
that. Yeah,
the PR people and the writers of the other various things, the novelization and stuff like that, they did not see an image of the alien
right.
before the movie came out.
Yeah.
And like I
Well,
said before, it's like if they did, they would have noticed the alien hanging down
well,
because
yeah,
he was clear in full screen almost.
right.
It's like if you saw any kind of image of what the alien looked like, it would have been over. It
Really,
would ruin that intention,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And yeah, I mean, it worked so well. The lighting worked so well, even when there was some imperfections, even though we don't see the imperfections nowadays because we are dealing with a digital medium. It's been transferred to a digital medium.
it
The
cleaned it
way
up.
it's outputted are different. At the end of the movie, those strobe light effects. Well, if you're watching on analog, VHS tape or film strip, it was causing a strobe, almost slow motion effect,
Right,
or it's
right,
messing with like the blur, right? And you don't get that nowadays, but it was causing like this really different look that's never been seen before.
hmm,
Yeah, I mean, I love the film. It is so good at its tension, like you said. That feeling claustrophobic. The art design. Of the sets. It's not that clean Apple store. Like we see in the new
right,
Star Treks nowadays, or even
right.
like the
That's
Star Treks in the '90s.
right,
Everything was clean. They had Star Trek had carpet on the floor, but the carpet didn't have no stains on it.
right, right, right,
Everything was pristine. There was maybe the kitchen area that looked kind of clean, but it wasn't really white. It was kind of like this eggshell, and there was kind of
right.
maybe
you,
stains on
you kind of
there.
feel like you're on an ocean freighter, sitting in the galley talking about, hey, we got this distress signal. Like, really, I'm ready to go home. I'm counting my beans. I'm ready to go home. And
Well,
yeah, it
it
really,
felt lived in. It felt
yeah,
lived
it did. Right, right. You felt
and
like you were
used.
there. It didn't feel like I said, there's no anesthetic feeling to it. Yeah, it's like these guys are space truckers. They're out there doing a job. They're dirty. It's a hard job. They just happen to be in space. Same thing being on a ship or an airplane. It's yep, yeah, it's a
Well,
good
even
movie.
truckers nowadays, maybe not as much nowadays, but at least when I was growing up, a lot of these truckers were sleeping and living in their trucks.
Oh yeah, and I've been in, I've seen some of these trucks. They're nasty as hell. And one thing I don't really talk about, but this was one of the first films where we had a woman protagonist. With Sigourney Weaver, her, took over a typically male role in the hero. I thought that was kind of interesting way back then. Because yeah, we're not. It was interesting that they talked about that, how the progression of her role was a more male dominated sort of role. Or I think it helped
When
her.
I write things, I like to write, non-gender specific, right?
Right,
It's like, well, this role could be played by anybody. They're just human. Unless you start bringing in sex into the equation or relationships into the question, that's when, that starts restricting you.
Right.
But if you don't, it's like, well, and that's what made, Ripley's character so interesting. It's like, yeah, it didn't matter if she was a woman or a female. Did anyone
Right.
ever mentions like, oh, she can't do that because she's a woman?
Right.
And that's the reason why she can't do, this
Right.
certain thing, or that's why she can do this certain thing. It's like, no, she was just, they didn't even say what her position was. I assume she's like kind of like the XO, she's like
Right.
second in command, and
Right.
that was it. She's just a person in that position.
Right. Doing her job. Yeah.
Once you start bringing in specifics, then you start restricting yourself on casting,
Right. Right.
right?
Yep.
And that just benefited because, like I said, it's not our traditional, the modern feminists that have to bring up that point. It's like,
Right.
well, I'm being oppressed for certain reasons because I'm a woman. And then this is just, well, people aren't listening to her because, well, they're just not listening to her. Not because
Right.
she's a woman, just because she's in charge.
Yeah. No,
She
not,
doesn't
not,
know
yeah.
about mechanics, but she's trying to tell me what to do about my job.
Right. 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 Turn the
It
steam
didn't
on.
matter who she was. It could have been, Tom Skeeter's character bound down there. It's like you're the
Right.
captain of the ship. You don't
Right.
know how to do this little mechanic thing.
Right. You go back upstairs. Right.
Yeah, it's
Yes.
like,
Yeah.
and that's what made it so great, and she handled it so well, right? And it's like it didn't matter. Her gender didn't matter.
Mhm.
I mean, it really shouldn't matter. It's like,
Right.
and this is the prime example of how you can do that. Write a character who don't worry about the relationships and everything
Right.
else. Worry
It,
about
it,
the
it,
character's emotions, what they
right.
do, and what they say,
And
right?
right. And what this actor can bring to the role
Yeah.
that, like, you never know what this actor is going to bring to the role that the writer may not even thought about. And they're able to, add some flavor to the role. Yeah.
Well, there was a role in the film that really wasn't in the original script, and that
Which was
was the character of Ash.
okay.
Yeah, Android, Ian Holmes'
The
character.
Android.
He wasn't
Yeah.
in the original script. And I thought adding him making the film even better because we didn't really have a humanized image of the corporation on there. Like I said,
Right.
these are space truckers. They had Mother, the computer system,
Right.
but it's like, we needed that human face of the true villain of the story, that
Right.
corporation, right?
Right. Right. Right.
um Someone to actually force them to do what they did. Like I said, we take a lot of our ocean and sea and our naval experience and we kind of like relegate that to space, right?
Right.
So there is a maritime law that if you see a ship in distress or if they
Right.
have like the stress flag or a signal or if there's a SOS out in the ocean,
Right.
you have to stop.
Yeah.
It is like international law that you got to do
Right.
this, or at least in the US, it's like, yeah, it's like if they hear an SOS in the middle of the ocean,
But
you
then,
have
then
to
he throws
investigate.
it. Yeah. Then he throws in. Okay. If you don't go, you don't get your money. It's like, okay,
Yeah,
I guess we're
that's
going.
you signed a contract, and if it was all that, eh, hey, if I'm a space trucker, it's like, yeah, nah, we'll go there, we'll investigate, but we're going to take off, right? It's like,
Yeah. I don't see anything.
nothing says we have to actually go down there to like the
Right.
planet and say, it's like, hey, we
Start digging
stopped.
around.
You
Right.
can check the computers. We stopped.
Right.
You can't really tell us, I don't see cameras everywhere. It didn't
Right.
sound like there was recordings going on, knowing what's going on the ship. So they wouldn't have known if they actually went down the planet or not.
Right.
They would have
Then,
had to have that person that actually would have been able to report.
but then the movie would never have been any good. They wouldn't got the alien. Okay,
They
cut.
would
We're
have
done.
all
We can move on.
survived.
Right.
They would all been
That's no
alive.
fun. That's no fun. Alien wouldn't be what it is today.
Yeah, and plus, humanizing the corporation was a great idea, and it actually gave that kind of synergy to the other, like, other films,
Right.
right? Kind of gave that continuity, kind of gave that how information is relayed and also like passed on.
Cast on.
right?
Carry out. Good. I give it a two thumbs up.
And then, like I said, everything just worked in this movie. They did such a great job putting it all together, working with the restrictions with the lighting, because all these lights have like, they were using fluorescent lights. They were using else, I don't know if it was even LCD screens, I can't remember what they were tube based, it probably,
Oh
because
yeah.
this is
Oh,
the
oh yeah.
70s,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
you got like, three or four different color temperature lights,
Right.
going on,
One time. Yeah.
and you have to figure out, it's like, how am I going to get this to mix together and look right,
Yeah.
and it did, and every little detail went right for them. They got it right. Everything looked great. It launched another, what, three movies after this, and then they went on to Prometheus 2,
Right.
Alien Romulus is the newest one. But I mean, the first one is probably the best
Of
because
course.
it was unexpected, and it blew people's minds.
Right.
James Cameron came in for the second one, and usually, there's that problem with the sequel, right? I mean, the Empire Strikes Back for Star Wars was like the opposite side of the coin for the conversation of sequels. Sequels
Hmm.
never did good. Empire Strikes Back was the first one that's like, okay, the second movie was actually better than the first.
Yeah.
James Cameron did a really good job. I mean, he brings in the military. Usually, when you bring in the military to a sequel, it goes down there because you kind
Hmm.
of lose that personal connection, that terror of being confined. When you bring in military, that means you're not in really a confined area
Right.
because military
You're
comes at least in fours, and you got to have
right.
at least two people walking side by side.
Right.
you
You got
know,
some force. Yeah.
Yeah, and you have like a whole bunch of weaponry, especially in, Aliens, the second one, they have, the steady cam with the gun on it, with big guns and everything, they're well prepared, everything is less of a threat, right?
Right.
And, the first one they do it so well, it's like, what weapons do they have? They had a cattle prod,
Right. Yeah.
and then
They
they
weren't prepared. They
flamethrower.
definitely weren't prepared. Right.
They didn't have, guns or anything like that. It's like they had to deal with, we got to trap this thing and get it to the airlock. And then
Right.
they fail at that. They have a flamethrower, that was rigged together. It wasn't even a flamethrower. It was
So they
probably
had to
like
make
a torch to repair some
right.
pipings, but they did something to make
Jerry
it
rigged.
a
Yeah.
flamethrower.
They made it work. Right.
So yeah, I mean that just expands on something that we're missing nowadays, where we don't want to have our filmmakers have any restrictions on them. It's like, oh, what you can think of, we'll do. We'll just pay some
Yeah.
CGI to do it. And I
Yeah.
think that's restricting us nowadays because we're not having to think creatively how to make things work.
Right. And live within our limits. Because even though they're limited on money, but they're because it's I'm saying it's tough.
Definitely keep an eye out for the new series. It might be good. It might not. Not all the Prometheuses were
Right.
good. You know, but definitely check out Alien.
It's a
Right
great
now it
movie.
is on Disney Plus,
Right.
probably on Hulu as well, but that's the same place. Any final thoughts?
Oh no, just enjoyed talking about it. What are we going to talk about next week? We don't know yet.
I'm not
Are we,
sure.
oh,
Maybe we'll talk about Teenage Mutant Ninja
something green?
Turtles,
Yeah, something green. Yeah.
the 1991 live action.
Right.
So it'll be a surprise. We'll put it that
It's,
way.
all right. So we're on what Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcast, and iHeartRadio,
Yeah, and YouTube.
and YouTube. Oh yeah, YouTube. Yeah. All right. So we'll see you next week.
All right, we'll do, David, and we'll catch you all guys next week.
All right. Right. Thank you.